Hello, YouTube family. It's been a while since we've recorded a video, and Caleb's not even in this one, so I guess it's just me today. But yeah, we've been very busy the past year. I think the last video I posted was my birth video, my birth vlog. So it's been over a year since I have made any content. It's been nice just getting to focus on Melody and watching her grow so fast. She learns something new every week, and it's just hard to keep up with. It's hard to do a lot of things all at once. And I was in college and I was working the majority of the time that I was pregnant. I quit my job whenever she was born, right before she was born. And I've just been a stay-at-home mom over the past year, and also graduating college in December, this past December. So a few months ago. And I'm just now getting around to making YouTube content because we just moved to another state. We've been here a month. I'm finally settled in. I've got my new rhythm. No longer in school, no longer working. So content will be coming your way if you're one of those that has been waiting. I think there's probably like 5 people who actually care about this right now. But for those 5 people, I will be posting more regularly. So I know I posted a birth vlog, but I didn't actually talk about what happened in that video. I just kind of didn't talk at all, honestly. I just videoed the birth and made it into a less terrifying looking video than what was actually happening in real life. Let's go ahead and kind of dive into what happened, but also just kind of in this mentality of what I learned from it. At the beginning of my pregnancy, I felt called by the Lord to attempt a natural / unmedicated birth. And no one in my family had ever done that before. It wasn't something I just wanted to continue. It wasn't some sort of tradition or inspiration from someone else. I did not know where this desire came from. Genuinely, I did not. I have followed some people on social media who have done unmedicated childbirths, so maybe it came from there. But genuinely, I believe that it was the Lord, and especially in retrospect, I know it was God calling me to do this. And I'll share why. So I felt called to do that, and I started studying more about natural labor. And as I studied, I learned a lot, but one thing I learned that really stuck out to me was that birth is a mental game more than a physical game. And it has a lot to do with your brain and how your brain processes fear and whether or not it comes into agreement with that fear. And this is when it began to click to me that God was trying to teach me through this process of childbirth how powerful my mind can be and how it can either work in my favor or it can work against me. So, brief overview. I was induced at 38 weeks, which I did not want to do because induction makes contractions more painful and harsh because it disrupts your body's natural rhythm and the way your hormones work together to give you as easy of a birth as possible. So Pitocin, it makes contractions awful. That's all you need to know. But I needed to be induced because I had mild hypertension and I was itching all over, and they thought, okay, this could be cholestasis. You might have a liver problem. So we went ahead and got induced. I showed up to the hospital at like 5 a.m. and they put the IV in my arm, gave me Pitocin, and I blacked out hardcore. My heart rate started going down, and then that caused the baby's heart rate to go way down. And it was a solid 7 minutes of getting me on my hands and knees, shaking my belly, putting oxygen on my face, and her heart still was just decel going down, and just it wouldn't come back up for about 7 minutes, like I said. And we both, Caleb and I, looked at each other like, are we about to have an emergency C-section? What little part of me was actually cognitive in that moment was thinking those thoughts. But fortunately, God intervened, the nurses intervened. It was beautiful. They helped me out. They put me back with a cold washcloth, and does the trick every time. So my blood pressure began to come back up. What's the craziest part is that Melody actually, her heart rate got down to 45, and it was in the 140s before that. So it dropped 100 BPM. Okay? BPM, that's a musician term. I don't know if that's her heart rate. Her heart rate was 45, whatever that means. It ended up being okay, so we started the Pitocin. I didn't feel much pain. I think it had been 8 hours that we had been there, 9 or 10 hours, I think, that we had been there before I even started to really feel uncomfortable during this experience, which was totally God, because most people feel those Pitocin contractions and they are like, give me an epidural. But for me, my contractions were coming steadily, 2 to 3 minutes. I was like, I don't feel anything. I was just kind of vibing for a while. I was playing Clue. I was playing other games. It was nice. I didn't have any complaints until about 7 centimeters hit, and it was a different story entirely. Caleb was super helpful. He was holding the warm shower head on my back and speaking Bible verses out loud. We both got filled with the Holy Spirit. I was speaking in tongues in the shower. I was just saying, here we go. I'm going to conquer this. Like, this is it. This is transition. This is the famous breaking point where everyone wants to give up, but I can do it because the Lord is on my side. And transition is supposed to be very short-lived, right? It's supposed to be kind of like a couple hours at the most. As this was going on, and I was not progressing from a 7 centimeters, the contractions became more and more intense, and I was unable to relax in between my contractions. My hip flexors were like a Charlie horse cramp times 1,000 on the pain scale, and I had the famous labor shakes. At one point, I reached that breaking point in transition where I said the famous words of, I have to have an epidural. And then at one point I actually said, you guys won't let me die, right? Are you gonna let me die? And the things that crossed my mind were crazy. I considered just reaching down and pulling her out myself. I considered many things. I was not stable in this moment. It seemed eternally unproductive and unending. And fear began to just creep into my mind. And that's when things got worse. As I partnered with fear and I started thinking, man, is this going to get worse? Is pushing going to be worse than this? If it does, I don't think I can make it out of this. That's when it actually went from like a 10 on the pain scale to like a 2,000 on the pain scale. Okay, it was already painful, but like when I partnered with that fear, it's like the things I was afraid of and gave into thinking on, actually the fear made it come into fruition, if that makes any sense. Soon enough, though, I saw my midwife and she put her gloves on and she said, just take a couple deep breaths. And I was like, I'm scared to push. If it gets worse than how it feels right now, I'm not gonna make it. But when I started pushing, it was the opposite. It was like relief. It was like, finally. And those few moments that I had lost control over my mind in the pre-pushing process, I began to get my mind back on track during the pushing, because it was like my body was just gearing up for that final moment. The speakers were playing The Blessing by Carrie Job, and I just kept hearing, he is for you, he is for you, he is for you. And the nurses were singing it with me, and I asked people to pray. If you haven't seen my birth vlog, you'll hear me say, somebody pray. And everyone just started praying. Even the interns, the nurses, the doctors, all of them. Surely enough, after 30 minutes of pushing, I got to grab her myself. It was 19 hours of Pitocin-induced labor. My tailbone actually fractured during this labor as well. Not even 10 minutes after she was born, she was nursing. She latched perfectly. She never cried. I mean, she didn't cry until 2 days after she was born for the first time. She was just so calm, and I truly believe it was the calming presence of the Lord in that room. So, super surreal. That's the backstory of my birth. This birth was a physical representation of this mental journey I've been on my entire life. My biggest weakness and my struggle is taking my thoughts captive and making them obedient to what God says. And I have this bad habit of obsessing over my fears as if that'll somehow conclude in eliminating my fears. I realized that in labor, I was not feeling any pain until I got to about 6 or 7 centimeters. And even then it was manageable until I gave into that fear. I kept saying, if pushing is worse than this, I don't think I could do it. If the ring of fire hurts worse than this, I don't think I can do it. And when I began to verbalize that, that's when the pain got worse. I became more aware of it because I partnered with that fear that it wouldn't be doable for me. The fear of it getting worse actually caused it to get worse. But when I began to take deep breaths and just focus on the fact that God created my body and He commands my body to do this and He is with me and all I need to do is be still, I took those deep breaths and I took control back over my body. My nurses actually said, like, you're losing control here. You need to take deep breaths. When I did that and the fear began to subside, the pain was so much easier to manage and pushing was a relief. And what's crazy is that the thing I feared most was actually the least painful part of the whole process. The pushing was a relief. When she came out, it was the moment that I saw what all the hard work was for, and the surrender to just let my body take me through this. It was a joy after mourning and glory after suffering moment for me. And I began to see that the remembrance of struggle is wiped away and redeemed by the joyful memories that come after that victory. What I've learned through this journey is that I've often feared the end of battles a lot. I'm afraid that I can't let go of my current obsessions or my current fears, that I won't be able to give them to God. Surrendering to God's strength over my own inability is actually better, not worse. It is freeing to surrender control, because control keeps you in this bondage of, I have to do this. But when you surrender to God and you say, God, you do this, I can't do this on my own. I don't want to have these thoughts. I trust you with them. Trust is freeing. Surrender is freeing, and obeying God's law on what to think on and what not to think on, it may seem like a sacrifice, but it's really freedom. You may be thinking right now to yourself, why is this taking so long? I should be out of this battle right now. In my birth, I was thinking, it's been 20 hours. When is she going to come out? And you may be thinking in your current journey, why am I still dealing with this? Like, it's never going to end. Just hold on. Relax and allow God to bring you through those final pushes of your breakthrough. And don't miss your breakthrough just because you're focused on the fear of what's going to happen. Christine Caine once said this in one of her sermons. She said, don't miss the miracle of the dry ground you're walking on because you're looking at the walls of water on either side and hoping they won't crash back down on you. You may be in your deliverance right now, just as the Egyptians were when they walked through the Red Sea. You may be walking on dry ground, but you're missing that miracle of deliverance because you're so worried it's going to get worse, or that the walls of water that God is holding up are going to crash down. The one who split the sea is going to be faithful to hold those walls up around you. And that's what you have to remember in that pushing season of, this is my final moment with this battle. Like, I'm breaking through. I'm breaking new ground. That transition in birth. I believe it's called transition for a reason. We just moved, and that transition from moving from Knoxville to St. Louis, that was hard. That was hard. It required a lot of trust and sacrifice. But focusing on the fact that God is holding us up is what got me through the fear that could have made it potentially a lot more painful. So I say all this to say that you are being delivered. It may not feel like it. It may not look like it. Romans 8:18 says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. So don't partner with fear. The enemy's lies have no power until you believe them. Jesus was tested in the wilderness, but he never sinned. Ever. A lot of us have this mentality that when we face temptation, we're sinning and we're giving in, not realizing the difference between the two. But when we come into agreement with the lies by believing them, it causes the temptation to then become sin. 2 Corinthians 10:4-5 says, "The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." This, of course, can only be done if you know the truth and have people reminding you of that truth. In my birth, I had people telling me the things I needed to remember in order to stand strong. So it's so important to surround yourself with people who say, listen, this is the truth. You know it. Believe it, and allow that truth to set you free. I have a friend and mentor and counselor of mine. She is awesome. She's a pastor, and she has counseled me and many of my friends. She told me a story of how when she was pregnant with one of her children, the enemy came to her and lied to her and said that she was going to die when her child was born. And actually, a stranger on the street had told her, "You're going to die." So the enemy was definitely speaking this lie over her through other people and by his own powers. And she believed it. She didn't know that that was absolutely not in alignment with God's plan for her life and will for her life at the time. And she did not fight against that. She partnered with that fear, and she dwelled on it every day, and she spoke it. I'm sure she spoke, "I'm afraid I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die." She said it many times a day. And what's crazy is she actually did end up dying in her hospital bed when her heart flatlined. Her pastor walked in right afterward, and he didn't pray for healing. He didn't pray for resurrection. What he did was crazy. He pointed at her and he said, "I command the spirit of fear up and out of you in the name of Jesus." And what's crazy is her heart actually started beating again, and she remembers seeing herself from an aerial view and then jolting back up into her body when he said that. So the spirit of fear is so powerful. It is not something to be afraid of, right? The only thing to fear is fear itself. But it's not something you need to worry about as long as you don't partner with it, right? The enemy has no power until you say he does. He's like a weapon that he's waiting on you to grab and pull the trigger on. You have the authority over that. And the power of life and death really does lie in the tongue. Pastor Joe Dobbins preached recently on the power of the tongue and how there was a study that some scientists did about plants, and they spoke positive words to one plant, and then another plant they spoke death over and curses, and the other one actually thrived. The one that they spoke curses over died. It was just a house plant, same circumstances but different words spoken over those plants. And it reminded me of Jesus cursing the fig tree and how our words truly do hold so much power, and those words start in our minds. So I just want to encourage you not only to speak life over yourself and to disengage with that fear, but also have friends, have mentors, have counselors around you that will agree with you on what you're believing for and speak life over your situation. So that's all I have today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, you can click like and subscribe for more. Watch my birth vlog, and I will be uploading a video of my reaction to my birth video 1 year later, which is kind of hilarious. If you're interested, I promise I'm not going to be riding on the coattails of this birth the rest of my life, but it has been fun to make videos about, so I hope you enjoy it, and I hope your day is blessed. Thank you so much for watching.